Welcome to the NETMA Show, where we discuss news and current events and analyze how they impact your everyday life. My name is Kellen, and I'll be your host for today. Our first story of the day is going to be about interest rates. The Federal Reserve opted to push up interest rates by another 0.25%, bringing us to a total of about 2%. Now, they control interest rates overall by manipulating something called the federal funds rate. And that is simply the amount of interest that banks charge each other to borrow money from each other. Now, at first thought, you may think this has absolutely nothing to do with you, but it really does. And that's because banks will tie that rate into how much they charge you. So for example, if you are in the process of getting a mortgage, you can expect to pay a higher interest rate than you would have this time last year. Or if you're considering buying a car, or to a certain extent, the amount of interest that you'll pay on your credit cards. This means that your total financing costs will rise. And if that really makes you nervous, it's not all coming from a bad place. The Federal Reserve opted to push up these rates because the economy has been doing very well recently. Unemployment is at an all-time low, and the companies continue to generate more and more money. So the Federal Reserve opted to do this to make sure that the party kept going, to make sure that things don't get overheated, that people don't overextend themselves, taking advantage of more and more cheap money. The point of this is to make sure that we do not run into accelerated inflation, which means if that were to rise, it would be harder and harder for your dollar to buy goods and services that you use every day. Now, if that story puts pressure on your wallet, then here's a little bit of relief. This week, the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, opted to increase production by 600,000 barrels of oil per day. Now that sounds like a lot, but in comparison to the amount of oil that the world consumes every single day, it's not that much. But it can help slow the pace that the price that you've been paying at the pump has been rising. In fact, a barrel of oil has risen from about $25 a barrel a few years ago to about $75 per barrel now, which is the reason why you're paying more at the pump. Continuing on into our third story, Disney completed a transaction to purchase the assets of 21st Century Fox. Disney completed this transaction for a total of $71.3 billion, which they opted to pay half in cash and half in stock. And Disney managed to beat out Comcast, who offered $65 billion in pure cash for the same transaction. Now, the reason Disney and Comcast were really fighting for these assets is because the winner would then be able to control, or they would acquire 21st Century Fox, the movie studios, as well as the TV studios. And they'd also pick up assets such as the Fox regional sports broadcasts. Now, it's also important to remember that Disney is the owner of ESPN, which now means that Disney is really going to be your worldwide leader in sports. Now, this is coming off the back of the Department of Justice losing their case to prevent AT&T from purchasing Time Warner Cable. Now, this deal had been on hold since about 2016, and the Department of Justice argued that if the two companies merged, it would give consumers fewer and fewer choices for their media options, and that would reduce competition. That's typically bad. However, the court ruled that the Department of Justice simply didn't prove that case, and they're going to allow the deal to go forward, which totals about $80 billion. Now, this starts to interact with the fears around net neutrality, which suggests that internet service providers, such as an AT&T, would offer their broadcasting, their products, at a much more competitive rate on your bandwidth versus different media options such as Netflix or Facebook or YouTube. And so the idea is, if they're able to control or price out your options, that means you'd pay more to see YouTube and Netflix more so than you would to see HBO or any other AT&T asset. So with that, that wraps up this week's content. If you have any questions or you'd like to discuss further, I'm always happy to hear your feedback. Hit me up, leave me a comment down below. Please subscribe if you'd like to get more and more of the NETMA Show, where you can no longer say no one ever tells me anything. Until next time, peace.